Billionaire's disabled daughter got stuck in the mud, and the poor black boy who came to help her did something no one expected, something that would shake New York and change two families forever. The rain was heavy, the ground was dangerous, and little Olivia Blake cried for help while her wheelchair sank deeper into the thick mud. People walked past her without stopping. Some looked at her and still kept walking, leaving her alone, scared and shaking. Then a tired boy named Daniel Scott, dressed in his cheap work uniform, dropped his grocery bag and ran toward her through the rain, willing to get dirty and soaked just to save a child he had never met. But when the girl's billionaire father, Charles Blake, arrived and saw Daniel holding his muddy daughter, he exploded in anger, grabbed the boy, and shouted at him, thinking Daniel had hurt her. It was Olivia's broken voice that stopped him, and when he learned the truth, he froze, ashamed, and apologized to the boy who saved her. Daniel walked home that night, not knowing that his small act of kindness had already changed the path of his life. Because the next day, when he heard a knock on the door of his tiny apartment, he opened it to see Charles Blake standing there, and the proposal the billionaire brought with him would bring Daniel to tears and open the door to a future he never believed was possible. The rain had been falling for hours in New York, the kind of rain that made the streets look dark and cold. Water ran down the sidewalks like small rivers, and the air felt heavy, like it was carrying a warning. The clouds were thick, the sky was gray, and the park looked quiet, almost empty, except for the sound of running water and the smell of wet earth. Olivia Blake sat in her wheelchair near the middle of the park, her small hands shaking on the wheels. She was only 10 years old, with soft brown hair that stuck to her face from the rain. Her legs were covered with a blanket, but the blanket was now soaked and heavy. Her wheelchair was stuck deep in the mud, and each time she tried to move, the wheels sank deeper. The mud felt like hands pulling her down. She kept looking around, hoping someone would stop. People were walking past her, some with umbrellas, some running, some talking on the phone. They all saw her. She could tell from the way their eyes touched her and then quickly moved away, but none of them came close. Some took longer steps. Some turned their heads like they did not want to feel guilty. Some even smiled politely and kept going. But no one stopped. Olivia tried again, pushing the wheels with all her strength. Her arms hurt, her fingers felt numb, and her breath was unsteady. The wheels did not move. The mud held them in place. One wrong push made the chair sink deeper, and the front wheel disappeared almost halfway inside the thick brown ground. "Please," she whispered softly at first. "Please, somebody help me." Her voice was so low that even she could barely hear it, but she tried again, louder this time. The cold rain hit her skin, and her teeth began to shake. She felt small and lost in that big park, and fear sat in her chest like a heavy stone. Across the path, her nanny, Miss Parker, stood under a long wooden shelter meant for picnic tables. She was dry and comfortable, talking on her phone. Olivia kept looking at her, hoping she would see how scared she was. But Miss Parker only looked up once, frowned slightly, then turned her back and kept talking. Olivia wanted to cry, but she held it in, because crying would make her feel weaker. "Please," she whispered again, her voice cracking. A woman in a pink jacket jogged past. Olivia reached out a hand and called for her. But the woman looked straight ahead and did not slow down. A man in a suit walked quickly by, his phone pressed to his ear. Olivia tried calling him too, but he waved his hand like he did not want to be disturbed. Her stomach felt tight. The world around her felt wider and colder. She felt like she was fading into the background, like she did not exist. Then, far away, she saw someone walking fast with his head down. A teenage boy, maybe 15, maybe 16, wearing a dark green work shirt that looked old and worn. His shoes were wet, his pants were dirty, and a small grocery bag was in his hand. He looked tired, like the day had already taken everything from him. That boy was Daniel Scott. Daniel had just finished a long shift at the store where he worked. His feet hurt, his back felt heavy, and his eyes were burning from being awake since morning. All he wanted was to get home to his grandmother, who was sick and waiting for him. Rain fell on him like cold needles, and the plastic grocery bag kept slipping from his fingers. But something made him slow down. He saw a small figure far ahead, sitting completely still in the rain. Something about the girl's posture, her empty look, her wet hair stuck to her cheeks, made him stop walking. He squinted through the rain. When he saw the wheelchair, when he saw the mud around the wheels, when he saw her crying quietly and trying to push with shaking hands, Daniel dropped his grocery bag. He did not think. His body moved before his mind did. He ran toward her. Olivia looked up in shock as he came closer, water dripping from his hair. No one else had stopped. No one else had looked at her with real concern. But this boy, a stranger, was the first person to come running. "Hey," Daniel said gently, breathing hard. "Are you okay?" Olivia shook her head, her lips trembling. "My wheels. I'm stuck. I can't move." Daniel bent down, not caring about the mud that swallowed his shoes. Rain soaked through his shirt, but he did not stop. He tried pushing the wheelchair from behind, but it did not move. He pushed again, harder, but the mud held the wheels like glue. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not leaving you." He then crouched in front of her, his knees sinking into the mud. He looked up at her with worried eyes. "I'm going to pick you up, all right? I just need to get you out of this mud. You're not safe here." Olivia nodded slowly, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. Daniel wrapped his arms under her gently and lifted her. She was light, but the mud made it hard to stand. He pushed through the ground with all his strength, trying not to slip. Rain hit his face, soaked his clothes, and the mud tried to pull him down, but he held her tight. Olivia wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on like she was afraid of falling again. "I got you," Daniel whispered. "You're safe." He walked slowly toward a stone bench under a tall tree. Each step felt like dragging heavy weights, but he did not stop. He placed her gently on the bench, making sure she was steady. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Olivia's face, covered in mud and tears, slowly relaxed. She felt warm for the first time since she got stuck. Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but then he heard something behind him. A loud voice. A voice full of anger. "Get away from my daughter." Daniel froze and turned around slowly. A man in a long black coat was running toward them. His face was full of fear and confusion. It was Charles Blake, Olivia's billionaire father. The moment Daniel saw him, he knew something terrible was about to happen. Charles Blake's shoes splashed hard against the wet ground as he ran, the rain hitting his face like small stones. His heart felt tight, his breath was short, and all he could see was the sight of a teenage boy holding his muddy daughter. The fear inside him turned into anger, and the anger turned into confusion. He did not stop to think. He did not stop to ask. He only saw his child in the arms of a stranger. "Get away from my daughter!" Charles shouted again, louder this time. Daniel Scott stood still, water dripping down his face, his clothes soaked and heavy. His hands were shaking, not from fear but from the shock of being yelled at after trying to save someone. He looked at Olivia, then back at the man who was rushing toward him like a storm. Olivia's voice broke weakly. "Daddy, stop!" But Charles did not hear her. He reached Daniel, grabbed him by the shirt, and pulled him back with so much force that Daniel almost fell. "What did you do to her?" Charles shouted, his face close to Daniel's. Daniel raised his hands slowly, trying to speak, but his voice was too soft. I helped her." "You touched my daughter," Charles snapped. How dare you put your hands on her? The rain kept falling, hitting all three of them. Daniel lowered his head, confused and hurt. Olivia's small hands tightened on the edges of the stone bench. "Daddy, he did not hurt me," she cried. "He saved me." Charles did not look at her. His anger was louder than his daughter's voice. He pulled Daniel again. "Tell me what you did. Tell me now." Daniel's voice shook as he spoke. "Sir, she was stuck. Her wheelchair was sinking. She was crying. No one helped her. I only wanted to bring her out of the mud." Charles opened his mouth to reply, but then he heard something that made him stop. The sound of Olivia crying, not soft crying, but painful crying. "Daddy, please stop," she said, her voice breaking. "He helped me. He was the only one who came." Charles froze. That one sentence broke the wall inside him. He slowly turned to look at his daughter. Her hair was stuck to her face, her clothes were wet, and tears mixed with the mud on her cheeks. She looked scared, not because of Daniel, but because of him. Charles let go of Daniel's shirt. The boy stepped back, breathing hard, trying to catch air in his chest. His fingers trembled, and his heart felt heavy. He had expected a thank you, not this. Charles looked at Daniel with confusion in his eyes. His voice softened a little. "She was really stuck," Daniel said softly. "Sir, I promise you I did not hurt her. I lifted her because she was sinking fast." Charles blinked slowly, his anger falling like the rain around them. He turned back to Olivia. "Is that true?" he asked quietly. Olivia nodded, tears running down. "He saved me. He picked me up when nobody else cared." Charles felt something hit him deep inside. Shame, pain, guilt. He had rushed at the wrong person. He had shouted at the one person who did the right thing. For a moment, Charles just stood there, silent. He ran a hand over his wet hair, trying to think clearly, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Daniel looked down at the ground, ready to leave. But Charles spoke before he could move. "Wait," he said softly. Daniel stopped. Charles walked closer, eyes lower now, shoulders dropped. "I am sorry," he said, his voice slow and honest. "I should not have shouted at you. I was scared." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. Charles looked at the wheelchair stuck deep in the mud. He finally saw the truth. His daughter had been alone, calling for help while people ignored her, and the only person who came was this tired boy in a cheap uniform. Charles felt a sting in his chest. He bent down and pulled the wheelchair out of the mud, using all his strength. It took effort. It took minutes. By the time he got it free, his arms were covered in mud. He did not care. He pushed the wheelchair to Olivia, placed her gently in it, and wiped mud from her cheek. "I am sorry, baby," he whispered. Daniel watched them quietly, feeling like he should step away, but Olivia looked at him and gave a small smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for helping me." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He nodded. "You are welcome." Charles turned to Daniel again. "Let me give you a ride home. It is raining too much." Daniel shook his head. "No, sir, I am fine." But Olivia spoke up again. "Please let him come, Daddy. He helped me." Charles sighed softly. "Please, let me take you." Daniel hesitated, but his clothes were heavy, cold, and his grocery bag was still lying in the mud. He finally nodded. The three walked slowly through the rain toward Charles's black car parked on the side of the road. Olivia held onto Daniel's hand as they moved, her fingers small and warm in his. Inside the car, the heater hummed softly. Olivia leaned her head on the seat, comfort returning to her face. Daniel sat quietly, feeling out of place. Charles kept looking at him through the rear mirror. Not with anger now, but with something else, something unsure, something changing. "Where do you live?" Charles asked gently. Daniel gave him the address. A small building in a poor part of New York. Charles nodded without judgment. When they reached Daniel's home, Charles parked the car in front of a tiny, worn building with cracked paint and weak lights. Daniel stepped out slowly, holding his grocery bag that was now muddy and almost empty. Olivia looked at him from the window. "Good night, Daniel." Daniel smiled softly. "Good night." He turned to walk toward the building. But Charles rolled the window down. "Daniel." Daniel stopped and turned. Charles stared at him for a long moment. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You saved my daughter." Daniel nodded once, then went inside. Charles drove away slowly, but his mind did not leave that boy. Something inside him felt heavy and unsettled. That night, Daniel did not know sleep. His grandmother asked why he was so quiet, but he only said he was tired. But early the next morning, a loud knock hit their small door. Daniel opened it, and there stood Charles Blake. What he came to say would change Daniel's life. Daniel Scott stood at the door in shock, the cold morning air touching his skin as he looked at the man who almost shook his whole world the day before. Charles Blake stood there, dressed in a clean suit, but his face did not carry the proud, rich expression Daniel had seen yesterday in the rain. His eyes looked softer, almost unsure, like he was uncomfortable standing in front of that small, worn door. Daniel did not know what to say. His hands were still holding the towel he used to dry his hair. His breath stood still. "Good morning," Charles said slowly. Daniel swallowed hard. "Good morning, sir." For a few seconds, they both looked at each other without speaking. Rain still fell lightly outside, but the morning was calm. A small breeze blew past them. "May I come in?" Charles asked, his voice calm. Daniel hesitated, not because he did not trust him, but because he had never let someone important inside their small home. Their apartment was tiny, old, and nothing compared to the life Charles Blake lived. Daniel stepped back to make space. "Yes, sir. Please come in." Charles walked inside, looking around quietly. The apartment had cracked walls, an old sofa, a small table with 2 chairs, and a shelf with a few books and medicine bottles. The place was clean, but it showed how hard life had been. Daniel's grandmother, Evelyn Scott, walked in from the small kitchen. She was thin, gentle, with tired eyes but a warm smile. "Good morning," she said. Charles stood up straight, almost nervous. "Good morning, ma'am. I hope I am not disturbing you." She shook her head. "Please sit." Charles sat slowly on the edge of the sofa, like he did not want to break anything. Daniel stood beside his grandmother, waiting for the reason this man came. "I came to talk to Daniel," Charles said quietly. Daniel's heart jumped. He looked at his grandmother, who nodded softly, telling him to listen. Charles took a slow breath. "Daniel, I could not sleep last night," he said. "I kept thinking about what happened. I kept seeing my daughter in the rain. I kept hearing her crying. I kept seeing you lifting her out of the mud." Daniel lowered his eyes. He remembered the fear in Olivia's voice. He remembered the mud pulling at his feet. He remembered how cold she felt in his arms. Charles continued, "I judged you wrongly yesterday. I shouted at you. I grabbed you, and yet you still protected her. You still stayed with her." Daniel nodded slowly. "I only did what anyone should do, sir." Charles shook his head. "No. Anyone did not help. You did." The words sat in the room for a moment, heavy and honest. Evelyn looked at Daniel with quiet pride. Charles leaned forward a little. "Daniel, I want to thank you. Not with only words, with something real." Daniel frowned softly. "Sir, you already thanked me last night." "That was not enough," Charles said. There was a small pause. Daniel could hear his heart beating. He could hear the quiet hum of the fridge. He could hear the soft breathing of his grandmother. Charles lifted his eyes and looked at Daniel with something deep, something serious. "I want to offer you a full scholarship," he said. "For school, for your future." Evelyn placed a hand on her chest. Her eyes watered. "A scholarship," Daniel whispered. "Yes," Charles said. "Not only school. I want to help you with books, transport, food, clothes, everything you need to study well. You are a bright boy. You deserve a chance." Daniel's throat tightened. His dream had always been to finish school, to become an engineer. One day, but money stood in the way. He worked long hours to help his grandmother. He never thought someone like Charles Blake would stand in his living room offering something so big. "Sir," Daniel said softly, "I do not want to take advantage of anything." "You are not taking advantage," Charles replied quickly. "You earned this. My daughter is safe because of you. My guilt is that I could not reach her in time. But you could. You stepped into that mud when you had nothing to gain." Daniel swallowed again. He felt something warm building behind his eyes. "There is more," Charles added quietly. Daniel looked at him, confused. "I want to move your grandmother to a better hospital," he said. "She needs proper care. I can handle the bills." Evelyn covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks slowly, not from sadness, but from relief. For years, she hid her pain from Daniel because she did not want to add more weight to his life. "Sir, no," Daniel said quickly, stepping forward. "You do not have to do this. I will work harder. I can save more." "Daniel," Charles interrupted gently, "your grandmother needs help now. Not in a year. Not someday. Now." Daniel felt weak. He did not know how to answer. He looked at his grandmother, who wiped her tears with shaking fingers. "Baby," she said softly, "listen to him." Daniel turned to her. "Grandma." "Look at me," she said. "I am tired. I am old. I am sick. But I kept moving because I wanted to see you safe. If this man wants to help you, let him. Do not let your pride stop your future." Daniel looked down at the floor. His chest felt heavy, his eyes wet. Charles spoke again, slowly. "And Daniel, I want you to also spend time with Olivia. She keeps talking about you. She said she felt safe when you carried her. She wants to thank you properly." Daniel smiled softly, wiping his eyes. Charles continued, "What you did was more than kindness. You showed courage. You showed heart. People like you deserve help." A tear fell from Daniel's eye before he could stop it. He wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. But Charles shook his head. "It is all right," he said. "You have carried too much alone. Let someone help you now." Daniel looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly, weakly. "I accept," he whispered. "Thank you, sir." Charles stood up and stretched out his hand. Daniel took it with shaking fingers. Evelyn cried quietly behind them. Charles spoke again, his voice steady. "We start today. I will arrange the papers. I will take your grandmother to the hospital. After that, you will come with me and Olivia for lunch. She wants to see you." Daniel nodded, still wiping tears. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt the door of a new life open in front of him, a life he never dreamed he could enter. And as Charles walked out of the apartment, Daniel knew deep inside that everything was about to change. The hospital in New York smelled like clean floors and quiet hope. Bright lights shone from the ceiling, and nurses moved from room to room with calm steps. Daniel walked beside his grandmother as she sat in a wheelchair that Charles arranged for her. Her hands rested gently on her blanket, her breathing slow but peaceful. Charles walked on the other side, speaking softly to a doctor who guided them through the wide hallway. Daniel kept looking at everything, feeling like he had stepped into a world he had only seen in pictures. Machines beeped softly, patients lay in clean beds, and nurses smiled kindly at Evelyn as they passed. "Do not worry," the doctor said to Evelyn. "We will run some tests and give you proper care. You will feel better soon." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Thank you, doctor." Charles looked at Daniel. "She will be fine here." Daniel swallowed a soft breath. He had spent so many nights worrying about her, watching her hide her pain, holding her hand when she struggled to breathe. Seeing her here, finally safe, finally cared for, felt like someone had lifted a stone from his heart. A nurse came to them with gentle eyes. "We will take good care of her. You can stay with her for a few minutes before we move her to her room." Daniel bent down beside his grandmother. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She touched his cheek. "I am okay because you are okay." Daniel blinked back tears. "Grandma, I will come back after." "You go," she whispered. "Go spend time with them. You saved their child. Let them do this for you." Daniel nodded. He kissed her forehead. "I love you." "I love you too, baby," she said with a soft smile. As they left the room, Daniel looked back one more time. Evelyn waved weakly, her eyes full of love. Charles placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "She is in good hands. I promise." Daniel nodded again, trusting those words more than he ever thought he would trust anything from a rich man. They stepped out of the hospital and walked toward the car. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. The air felt fresh, like the city had been washed clean. Daniel's clothes were dry now, and he wore a jacket Charles had brought for him. It was warm, soft, and much better than the thin clothes he owned. Charles opened the car door. "Ready to see Olivia?" Daniel hesitated. His heart felt tight. "Does she really want to see me?" Charles smiled softly. "Yes. She has been talking about you all morning." Daniel got into the car. As they drove through the busy streets of New York, Daniel stared out of the window at tall buildings, bright shops, and people moving in every direction. The city looked different today, not because the streets changed, but because his life was changing. When they reached the Blake mansion, Daniel froze. The house was huge, too huge. Tall white walls, wide windows, a long path made of stones, and a garden full of bright flowers. Daniel felt small, like an ant walking into a giant's world. Charles noticed his silence. "You are safe here," he said quietly. Daniel nodded, but his chest felt heavy with nervousness. The front door opened slowly, and Olivia sat near the entrance in her wheelchair, holding a small blanket over her legs. Her eyes brightened when she saw Daniel. "You came," she whispered. Daniel walked toward her with a shy smile. "Yes, I came." Olivia reached out her hand, and Daniel took it gently. Her fingers were small and warm. "Are you feeling better?" he asked. "A little," she said. "I am happy you are here." Charles watched them quietly. Something soft filled his eyes. "Come inside," Olivia said. Daniel followed her into the mansion. The floor was shiny like glass, the ceiling tall with soft lights, and the walls smelled like clean air. Daniel tried to walk normally, but every step felt careful, like he was afraid of breaking something. Olivia rolled her wheelchair beside him. "You do not need to be scared. My house is big, but it is very lonely. You being here makes it feel less empty." Her words touched him deeply. They sat in the large living room. A giant painting hung on the wall, and a big window showed the garden outside. Daniel sat at the edge of the sofa, afraid to sink into it. Olivia watched him quietly. "Daddy told me what you did for your grandma," she said. "I think you are strong." Daniel looked down. "I just want her safe." Olivia smiled. "That is what strong people do." They talked slowly, gently. Olivia told him about school, about the books she liked, about the days when walking was easy for her before the accident. Daniel told her about his job, his small apartment, and his dreams that always felt too far away. "You are smart," Olivia said. "Maybe you can become an engineer." Daniel felt his chest warm. No one had ever told him he could be something big. Charles joined them after a few minutes, carrying 3 cups of warm chocolate drink. He placed one in front of Daniel. "Drink. You must be cold." Daniel took the cup carefully, smelling the sweet steam. He took a sip, and the warmth spread through his chest. Charles sat beside them. "Daniel," he said softly, "I want to offer you something else." Daniel looked up, confused. "I want you to attend Olivia's school," Charles said. "A full scholarship, books, uniforms, everything. You will not pay a single thing." Daniel felt the world stop. "Sir, why me?" he whispered. Charles looked at him with steady eyes. "Because you risked yourself for my child when you had nothing. Because you stepped into the mud when everyone else walked away. Because you deserve a chance to be more than life has given you." Daniel's breath shook. Tears filled his eyes again, but he wiped them quickly. Olivia touched his hand again. "Please say yes." He looked at both of them, at their faces, at the room, at the moment that did not feel real. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I accept." Olivia smiled wide. Charles nodded with relief. Daniel's life had already begun to change, but he did not know that this decision, this simple yes, would lead him into a future he never imagined. A future filled with tests he had never faced, people he had never met, challenges he had never expected, and a bond with Olivia that would grow deeper than either of them understood. And this was only the beginning. Daniel Scott woke up early the next morning in the Blake mansion, still unsure if everything happening in his life was real or a long dream. The soft bed, the clean clothes folded on the chair, the quiet hallway, and the warm smell of breakfast coming from the kitchen all felt too good to be true. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. He had never slept in a place like this. He had never felt this kind of peace before. He thought about his grandmother. The doctor had called last night to tell him she was resting well in her new room at the hospital. She had eaten, taken her medicine, and even smiled. Hearing that filled Daniel's heart with so much relief he could barely breathe. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was bright, and the garden looked fresh. The flowers were open, the grass was clean, and the air looked clear. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt hope sitting inside him, warm and steady. He left his room quietly and walked downstairs. The mansion was large, too large, and his footsteps echoed softly. He felt shy walking through the rooms, afraid he might step somewhere he should not. But when he walked into the living room, he saw Olivia waiting with her hands folded neatly on her lap. She smiled as soon as she saw him. "Good morning." Daniel smiled back. "Good morning, Olivia." Her hair was brushed neatly, and she wore a clean pink sweater that made her look brighter than yesterday. Her wheelchair was beside the big window, where sunlight touched her face gently. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "Better than I have in a long time." "I am glad," she said softly. "Daddy told me he has something to show you today." Daniel blinked. "Something else?" "Yes," she said, smiling wider. "You will see." A moment later, Charles Blake entered the room. He wore simple clothes today, not his usual suit. He carried a set of papers in his hand and looked more relaxed. "Good morning, Daniel," he said. "Morning, sir," Daniel replied. Charles sat in front of him. "First, I want to tell you that your grandmother is stable. I checked with the doctor. She slept through the night." Daniel breathed out slowly. "Thank you." "You do not need to thank me," Charles replied. "You saved my daughter. This is the least I can do." He placed the papers on the table. Your school enrollment forms, he said. You will start next week. Daniel's eyes widened. So soon? Yes, Charles said. I do not want you to lose any more time. You deserve this. Daniel touched the papers gently. His hands shook a little. Charles looked at him carefully. There is one more thing. Daniel looked up. I want to offer you a place here, Charles said slowly. A room, a home. You do not need to stay in that small apartment anymore. Your grandmother will move here when she is discharged. Daniel froze. His breath stopped for a second. A home, Daniel whispered. Yes, Charles said. I know this is sudden, but you are not a stranger to us. Olivia sees you as a friend. I see you as someone with courage and respect. You do not have to feel alone anymore. Olivia added softly, Please stay. The house is too big. It feels warmer when you are here. Daniel looked down at his hands. His eyes burned. His heart felt like it was being held too tightly and too softly at the same time. Sir, he whispered, I do not know if I belong here. Charles shook his head. You do. This is not about money. This is about family. And sometimes, family is not only made by blood. Sometimes it is made by kindness. Daniel swallowed, his voice trapped in his chest. I do not know what to say. Say yes, Olivia whispered with a smile. Daniel looked at her, then at Charles, then at the home around him. Everything felt unreal, but also right. He thought of his grandmother. He thought of the nights she cried in silence. He thought of how the rain hit his face yesterday, how his feet sank in the mud, how he lifted Olivia without thinking, how he never expected anything in return. Yet here he was. Slowly, Daniel nodded. I will stay, he whispered. Olivia clapped her hands softly, smiling so wide her eyes shined. Charles let out a breath, relieved. Good, Charles said, because we have a lot to do. School meetings, hospital visits, and of course, your new room. Daniel's cheeks warmed. Thank you, sir. Stop calling me sir, Charles said kindly. Call me Charles. Daniel nodded shyly. The rest of the day moved slowly, warm and peaceful. Olivia showed Daniel around the mansion. The halls were long, filled with quiet paintings and soft carpets. She showed him the library, where tall shelves held books bigger than anything he had at home. She showed him the garden, where she often sat to feel the sun. She showed him the music room she rarely used anymore because of her wheelchair. Each place felt like another world. In the afternoon, they visited the hospital. Evelyn's face lit up when she saw Daniel and Charles enter together. She held Daniel's hand and said softly, You look happy. Daniel nodded. I am, Grandma. Charles explained the plan softly to Evelyn. She listened carefully, tears filling her eyes. She touched his arm gently. You are a good man, she whispered. Thank you for seeing my grandson. Charles shook his head. He is the one who changed everything. That evening, back at the mansion, Daniel sat beside Olivia outside in the garden. The sky was turning orange, and the air felt soft. Daniel, Olivia said quietly. Yes? I am glad you came into my life. Daniel looked at her. I am glad too. But, she continued, are you scared about school? It is a big school. Daniel laughed softly. I am scared. Very scared. Olivia nodded. It is okay to be scared. I am scared of many things too. Daniel looked at her wheelchair. You are strong, he said. Olivia smiled sadly. Some days I do not feel strong. Some days I want to cry because my legs do not listen to me. Some days I wish the accident never happened. Daniel listened, his chest hurting for her. But, she said softly, yesterday you ran through the rain for me. That means I am not alone. Daniel looked at her with gentle eyes. "You are never alone." They sat quietly for a while, watching the sky change colors. The world around them felt peaceful, but Daniel knew deep inside that this was just the beginning. A beginning of a new life, new challenges, new hope, and a new bond he never expected to find. He had stepped into the mud to save a stranger, and he walked out with a family. Dear viewers, this story teaches one of the strongest lessons in life. Sometimes, help comes from the person you least expect, and sometimes, one small act of kindness can change the path of your entire future. Daniel Scott was just a poor boy walking home in the rain, and Olivia Blake was a scared child sinking in the mud. But that single moment brought two broken families together and healed wounds that money could not touch. This story reminds us that kindness is stronger than power, love is louder than fear, and family is not only about blood, it is about who shows up for you when the world walks away. If Daniel had walked past that day, none of this would have happened, but he chose to run towards someone who needed help, and that choice created a new life, a new family, a new hope. Dear viewers, tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and tell us what you learned from this emotional story. Did it touch your heart? Did it open your eyes? Did it remind you of someone who helped you when you needed it most? Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs encouragement today. And if you want more emotional and powerful stories from us, comment "more stories," and you will be the first to get the next one. Before you go, answer these 3 questions in the comments. 1. Would you have helped Olivia if you saw her stuck in the mud that day? 2. What did Daniel teach you about kindness and courage? 3. Do you believe family can be created through love, even without blood?